Well, a very good evening to you, and thank you very much for joining us on this very first episode of BAC-chat. Who knows? Could be the very last episode of BAC-chat, so it might be history in the making. The reason this has come about is because there doesn't seem to be a live stream event for building automation professionals, and so thought we'd give it a go, try one, and see how that works out. Just to introduce myself, my name is Andy Camsell. I work within the BeMS industry. I have done for my sins for about the last 25 years. Before that, I was an air conditioning engineer. I have a day job where I work for a systems integrator for Belfield Systems, but I also act as a trainer for the Building Controls Industry Association, presenting their courses and materials. Should just, as far as disclaimers go, I am not acting for the BCIA for this broadcast. This is entirely of my own volition. So these are my views that I'm airing this evening. The channel has been set up on YouTube with the idea of having a monthly chat, but there is also a website which is down here somewhere over that side, www.BAC-chat.com. The idea of the website is there's a forum on there, and so you can go along. There is a help forum as well, which I've set up, may or may not be of use. But if the YouTube channel is to continue, then it would be really great to get your ideas about what content you would like to see, what you would like to talk about, and maybe if you'd like to be involved in the broadcast. So anyway, that's enough about me and the channel. I'd like to introduce my guests, if I may, who tonight are going to be talking with me about issues surrounding the current COVID crisis and how it affects our industry. First up is James Palmer, who is Head of Sales and IoT at Global Associates. Good evening,
Hey.
James.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us here today.
Welcome.
If you could just briefly introduce yourself and your function within Global, that would be great.
Yeah. Well, I run the sales division, but I also run our Global Spaces division, which I think might be more relevant to what we're going to talk about today. Global Spaces is all about how we get the most out of the latest IoT cloud technologies and the impact that those will have on how we control buildings in the future. So most of what we do in our industry is about applying electronics to a plant room and to unitary devices out in the field. And what I'm trying to do, what we're trying to do in the global spaces world is take the information not just from the plant room, but from the people as well and the users of the building. So the making the building work more in tune with the way it's being used by using the most modern technology. So.
Okay. Fantastic. So we don't sort of formally know each other, but we kind of do the circuits together. So at Smart Buildings, I very often watch James' seminars that he presents there. I do that obviously in various capacities. My next guest is a much younger engineer. I met him through the BCIA courses. He is actually the Ops Director at InTandem Systems, and that's George Belfield. Hello, George. Welcome.
Thanks, Andy. Hi.
Hi there. Can you just tell us a bit about your role at InTandem?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think I timed becoming Ops Director with the pandemic, so that was an interesting start to telling people how to do things. But for the last sort of 6 or 7 years, I've been working my way up through the controls ranks on the commissioning side of things. Yeah, as you said, did a lot of courses and started learning my trade with you, and then getting out in the thick of it and getting stuck into some BMS.
Cool.
More recently, get more about running of the ops side of things in the controls systems integrator.
Okay. We're going to set off. So for this first session, obviously without feedback from the public, so to speak, I picked the topic. COVID seemed to be the most relevant topic of the moment. So I've sent the guys a kind of list of things we want to talk about. If you want to chime in on the chat, then please do. There is a lot going on my screen, and honestly, I'm not much of a multitasker, so if I do miss your comments, I apologise, but we'll try and bring those in where we can. The first thing that I wanted to talk about was how the pandemic has changed our working practices right now, and how it's made changes to the way that we do traditional projects, so the way that we commission our sites and the way that we provide maintenance and service to those. So if I could start with you, George, what are the biggest changes that you've seen over the last year through this pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, firstly, it put the brakes on everything. So we saw a complete sort of stop for at least for a few days or a few weeks while all the announcement went on in last March. But it gave us a big opportunity to really push our remote monitoring, and James touched on it with the connectivity and sharing data and whatever. But it suddenly became a very nice proposal to people who perhaps hadn't considered a remote BMS, even if it was just a one plant room type BMS or a massive 10,000 point integration site. It gave our big change for us was to get that connectivity as early on as possible in a project. The earlier the better, and then we can support whatever demands. That it was also great for the customer, but for our own guys as well. That a lot of this pandemic makes people feel quite anxious, and different people have different levels of exposure and levels of exposure that they're happy with. So taking anything that was possible off site was a really positive start for us. We've sort of worked with in terms of actual functionality of a building, we've worked with the changing guidelines really, as ventilation's come under a fair bit of scrutiny for how an air handling unit should traditionally work. Now and then and now, there's a fair bit of research going on. I know at the moment about mixing boxes and thermal wheels, and perhaps whether they're as useful as they perhaps once were. But then we did it. We and for the last year or so, we've been rewriting a lot of software and strategies to try and get the best out of their existing air plant without getting any downtime for the customers still trying to use their buildings. So there's a couple of things there.
Okay, just sort of expanding on that, James. So, I mean, I've seen your seminars. I know you're a great advocate for remote connectivity and integration. But has this been a time when you've been able to go, "Ha, told you so," and people have come on board with that, or is that, or is this something you are seeing people progressively change to as well?
There's definitely been some take up of some long since forgotten proposals in that respect. So offers of remote dashboards, remote connectivity to site that weren't taken up or have been suddenly taken up. That's definitely a thing we've noticed, and people going to full fresh air, as George sort of touched on, in their air handling plant, and us sort of scratching our heads and wondering how that's going to work in deep midwinter, and whether the plant they've got and the heating, have they got enough heating capacity to cope with a full fresh air system? Can we do any recirculation safely? What the effect of ultraviolet light is, and can we realistically install things like that to make the air safe? And there has been so remote monitoring is definitely come of age, I suppose. The more interesting thing I thought was people counting technology and understanding how many people there are in a space, and almost trying to shepherd people into different areas. So if you haven't got the heating capacity to run full fresh air in the middle of winter, perhaps you need to not ventilate or not heat or ventilate certain parts of the building. So how can you? Are there ways? Do you have capacity? are enough people working from home that you can close a couple of floors? Can you close a couple of floors and keep social distancing? And how do we manage that? And is the infrastructure you've got in your building good enough that we can isolate a floor? Is it physically possible to close all those dampers? So there's been a lot of investigation into that sort of thing. I think a lot of people have taken their foot off the gas a little with it. I think they think the vaccine's going to see the end of COVID-19. I think that might be slightly naive. I think that variants of COVID, this virus will mutate, and I think that we'll be seeing other variants. Well, no, there's a high probability, right, that there'll be another version of this thing along before long, and having safer buildings is going to be really important, actually, for employers as a duty of care to their staff, to say that they've done whatever they can to make that building safe. And so, yeah, people are working from home, aren't they? So buildings are being used in a different way. They're being used less frequently. So we ought to be ventilating them less frequently, heating them, cooling them, lighting them less frequently. So we need to understand when they're being used.
I certainly would reflect that. The changes I've seen, training for the BCIA has been really interesting, because obviously we have a course which is set in stone and agreed, and this is how you do things, except this is not how we do things at the moment. But you have sort of brilliantly segued us, thank you for that, James, into the next topic that I wanted to talk to, which is about the change of use of buildings. But before we do that, there is a comment, and I do want to at least get one comment in. So Alan Jones has said that remote panel testing and witnessing has been a godsend. Have you guys had any experience of that? George, you're nodding your head. Remote panel testing and witnessing. Yeah,
absolutely. So we build a lot of our own control panels, which is a useful thing. But we can then set them up, and we've done factory tests to consultants and clients over Teams, where we're connected in, showing live data to the control panels. I'm the only person in the room, but they're seeing the full BMS, there and then. So absolutely, it was received really well. It has to be done honestly, because you could it could be misused if you're just fudging data. That's one thing, but in an honest way, it works great.
Excellent. Presumably, this is something that you've been involved with as well, James, as a company.
Yeah, we've our new 4G gateway. Sorry, a bit of a plug there, but our new edgewise device, which is a gateway for wireless LoRaWAN sensors and BAC-net, and provides a VPN tunnel into the site. So we've been busy installing those on lots of our key projects, so that when we weren't able to get to site, we can work remotely, commission as remotely as possible, with as few hands on site as possible, and engineers working remotely to keep the ultimate social distancing of staying at home. So that's been very much a feature of the last year, and has opened up new opportunities for us as well. So there's good side, there's benefits to all this. It's the necessity is the mother of invention. That's the phrase I was trying to think of.
That's the one. So, sort of going back to what you were just discussing before that, the change in use of the building, you've sort of touched on this, something which I feel people aren't really taking on board. Not everyone, a lot of people seem to be of the opinion that all this will be over, we'll get the vaccine, we'll go back to normal. But there is a new normal. So starting with you, James, you obviously do think that the use of buildings will change. What do you think will be those changes? Will it be the types of buildings we need, or the way that we work within those environments, hub and spoke type of working?
Even before COVID, companies like British Land have gone from providing shell and cores for people to fit out to providing fully fitted out service offices. So even companies like that at that level are going to more towards the WeWork sort of model, and large blue chips are moving out of, their headquarters, or moving large quantities of staff out of major headquarters and into more flexible working spaces. So there was already a move towards more flexible working, people having the freedom to work from home. People are certainly working, their own hours. The old 9 to 5 thing is definitely a real thing of the past for a lot of us. But there was some ONS figures I pulled together for. You mentioned the Smart Building Show last year, so I'll just put them here. So in 2019, the number of people working from home was 4% of the total workforce, and 48% of us did some work from home last year because of COVID. And they surveyed those 48%, and basically we got to 20%. They got down to 20% of the total workforce would like to continue some level of working from home once COVID's over. So that means 80% are still pretty keen to get back in the office. I work from home anyway. This is my normal desk. The kitchen, the fridge is just there, which explains my ballooning size, which has not been so good for me. But after a year off, I could really do with a week or two in an office with some banter and some friendly faces. And so I think most people would be fairly keen to get back in. But yeah, the number of people working from home will go up, because some people have liked it and enjoyed it, and lots of businesses have found that actually it hasn't had a negative effect. So we've got more people working from home, more flexible workspace. Those buildings can't be controlled by a dumb set of calendars and timers. It isn't fully occupied at 8 until 6. So why fully heat it, fully ventilate it, fully cool it, fully light it between 8 and 6 to achieve maximum occupancy? Sure. So buildings need to be smarter.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we're certainly seeing where I live, Crowborough in East Sussex, it is basically commuter land. And obviously people are suddenly not having the train fare to pay. So there's a lot of love for, working from home, not permanently, but like you say, more working from home. But I also am just having sort of conversations with building owners. They're leasing space, which maybe they're not going to need. So maybe there's cost savings at the other end of it as well. But I agree with you that it is going to lead to a change, or I believe it will lead to a change in the way we control buildings, and they need to be smarter. You're nodding away there, George. Is this something you believe as well?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of buildings got found out in that you suddenly have got a sixth floor building, and only one of the floors is occupied on a given week, and the air handling unit did the whole lot. And you suddenly got no way of isolating these things without using the full amount of energy. So it gives us a bit of a platform and a blueprint to go, all this zoning and all this smart control that we, like to do and like to push, that this is what you need for these kind of partitioning and flexible workspace like we've been talking about. And it just, we've got a great example now of how it should be good examples and bad examples of smart buildings in light of the new working conditions.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Alan has chimed in again and said, unfortunately, many FM teams are reluctant to take the challenge of change, which I would also agree with. I think there's a lot of appetite for this new way of working, but I think there's a real hill to climb here. Would you guys agree with that? Yeah,
one of the things that I'm focusing on is talking to end users directly, because they will buy into it. I can show them a return on investment, and they get usage stats out of it as well. So you can tell them where people are. They get all their space utilization data, and we save them energy. So they've got a whole GDPR story around how their buildings are greener. Everything they're doing is more efficient. I don't know if you can still hear me. It's raining outside, and our Wi-Fi goes when it's raining. It's a bit funny when it rains here. So they get a lot of extra data out, and so they buy into it really quickly. As a sales process, that's a much easier argument to have than the FM or the M&E contracting and consulting route. So we're definitely focusing our energies in sales at the end user for those very reasons. Yeah. But that's not to say that that isn't a problem that needs to be dealt with, right? I mean, sure, it can come from all of us.
Yeah. just want to sort of move on. We've already touched on topic 3. Firstly, I have to say I'm quite alarmed, James, that with your head of IoT, and when it rains, your Wi-Fi goes out. These two things do seem in slight opposition to each other.
Yeah.
But
I live in the South Downs National Park, and we're at the in the middle of nowhere.
Fair enough. But the way that technology is set to change how we do things, and I particularly want to think about connectivity here. So, sort of George, James has already talked about the fact that buildings need to be smarter, and we need to look at people counting. We need to look at occupancy profiles in real time rather than what they should be. How do you see that feeding into our industry? What do you think? And obviously, no one's going to hold to this if you're wrong. Although this is recorded and will be on YouTube forever. But how do you think? Just saying, how do you think this will feed into our industry, and what changes do you think are likely to arrive in BeMS as a result of this?
Well, the more exposure that people get to this kind of thing, and the more benefit that is observed, then the easier it becomes to streamline and sell this in. I think that James touched on one thing that was the cost side of things, and if you've got a return on an investment using this technology, then that is one major obstacle to overcome. The smartphone culture at the moment has made our job easier as well, because you're talking to a lot of experts, even though they don't know they're experts yet in BeMS and smart way of doing things. A lot of the concepts are no longer alien to people because we do them every day in a slightly different guise. If you talk about sort of usage profiling, then just by being exposed to these technologies on our phones and whatever, and sort of that concept, it's much easier to accept when we can, rather than being a, really long shot. So that just being around it is going to make it easier. Is it going to be adapted? Yeah, I think it is. But you're still going to get the tiers and levels. So there's going to be your isolated plant rooms. There will be a few people who stay stubborn. But the bigger the site, the almost the easier it is to do, because of the gain and reward that you get from it.
Yeah, it's cool. James, just sort of pushing you into the conversation. The last smart buildings we were at, you were talking about BeMS as a service. So you host your control in the cloud. Do you think this could be a driver for that? Do you think that could be a technology which people adopt? I
think a lot of low risk elements of BeMS will get migrated to the cloud where there's a big enough benefit for it to exist there. The reluctance to rely on internet connections, he says, as I pixelated earlier, because it rained, the reluctance to rely on internet connections for cloud services is actually largely unjustified in large buildings, in commercial buildings in London, for example. That every single one of those buildings, the core function of every business on every floor of the cheese grater, for example, relies on an internet connection. There's not a dealing floor in London, a lawyer's office, a trader anywhere that doesn't rely on an internet connection. So relying on and so there was layers of redundancy built into those all over the place. And if the heating goes off because the internet has gone down, that is the least of their problems, right? At that point. So the fear of what we experience at home. And the fact is, actually, if my internet did fail here, then I've actually got a 4G signal on my phone that I can jump onto straight away. So I have redundancies built into my house for that. So it's the fear of that will disappear slowly, but it will be slow because this is an oil tanker of an industry, isn't it? It doesn't turn corners very quickly. I think one of so it will migrate to the edge and BeMS will migrate more and more to the edge, and features of it will start creeping up into the cloud, and I think it will be an evolution rather than a revolution. The revolution will be in wireless technologies. So this is now the age of wireless, right? And wiring things. Sorry to any electrical installer friends watching this. But I see, I see the technology that we're using right now with wireless relays that go up to 10 kilometers and 10-year battery lives in them, and wireless sensors. That technology wasn't available 2 years ago. It really wasn't. And now the ranges we get on these wireless sensors is phenomenal, and the reliability of them is phenomenal. So at that point, the cost of doing lots and lots of extra monitoring to make a building much, much smarter becomes much easier and a much more affordable argument to go in and put in people counting tech, to go in put in CO2 and air quality sensors. If I'm not having to wire them, I'm not having to add an extra physical point onto the BeMS. I'm not having to decorate after putting a cable in. All of those things that just add monumental cost are just literally sticky footing something to a wall.
And presumably using wireless technology, obviously, coming back to this discussion about the future of buildings, it makes them inherently more flexible in having wireless technology, because even if you keep the sensors in the same place, it's just a simple case of reconfiguring those wireless sensors to talk to a different part of the system.
It's about confidence on that. Sorry, it's just about confidence on that. As soon historically, if you go, you said 2 years ago, if you go back much more than that, then people will have had a lot of problems with the wireless sensors. Only now are they suddenly a viable option to to really make some headway. So as soon as people get confidence in that, as the same with the internet connection, we're on to a winner.
Protocols like LoRaWAN, low powered radio, long range, wide area network. That is really game changing tech. We tested some sensors on a big hospital, Hammersmith. I'll tell you, it's Hammersmith Hospital, the renal unit. So it's a 7-story building. You can look it up on Google and have a look at the building. We put the receiver on the plant room on the roof on the 7th floor, and that was at the back of the building. And we put a temperature sensor down on the ground floor reception area, so it's diagonally through a 7-story building, and that's a hospital full of tons of radio interference, and we got a 48% signal, right? So it's phenomenal, right? And the engineer actually took the sensor off the wall and he walked down the road with it, and I was stood on the roof reading the signal.
Come back with my sensor.
It was remarkable. I lost sight of him before we lost signal. So it's truly game changing, this tech, and the price you can buy a temperature and humidity and CO2 sensor like that for 80 quid that sticks on the wall. Well, actually 110 quid, those ones with the CO2 in them. You can't pull a cable for that.
This is very true. That's quite a sort of good note. I'm conscious of time. I didn't want to drag on, and I appreciate. I don't want to cut you guys off, but I think that kind of that brings us to quite a good note, really, because we seem to be fairly agreed that there is likely to be change. Would you agree with me that there is a consensus among the three of us, at least, that the problems are getting people's attitudes to change rather than the technology not existing to do this?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the more we deliver, the more case studies we get out there, that will change the attitudes. We need to find customers that will help us get stuff into buildings so that we can shout about it. That's the way to do it.
A little bit of success, and
push them over the line. Okay. Guys, thank you very much for joining me for this first ever back chat. I really appreciate your input, and as I said at the beginning, no one knew how this was going to go, so I do appreciate that you have stuck your heads above the parapet for this. I'm going to say goodbye to you guys now, so thank you very much, and like I say, really appreciate your input for today. So I'll catch you guys later. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Just to refresh your memory here, that website address is back up there, www.BAC-chat.com. I know this is probably not as thrilling as Coronation Street, but once a month, if you've got half an hour and you want to join in the conversation or hear what's going on, do please subscribe to the channel and join us. The website there is a chat forum. It would be really useful if people have got topics that they think we need to discuss, then please do go to the website and just jot your thoughts down there. We'll look at trying to dig out some guests, tell them that we're going to make them a star. And then, we'll be able to obviously bring different topics as the months go on. If you want to go there and say it was rubbish, then, be gentle with me. BeMS engineers, we're sensitive souls. But yeah, please do, if things aren't right, then we'd like to know. I'm not a TV presenter, I'm a BeMS professional. So thank you very much for your time this evening. This will be available on our YouTube channel. So if you thought any of the discussion was useful and you want to point one of your colleagues to it, please do. And we will maybe catch you next month on the February edition of BAC-chat. So yes, thank you very much for your time. Catch you later.